Hey everyone, this tutorial is going to cover how to bracket on Bracket Wrestling. So I have my tournament already configured. I'll just select my tournament. Take me to tournament home. I'm going to click on brackets. Now from here, I have my toolbar of options. The way the screen is set up, the left hand side is the unbracketed wrestlers and the right hand side are the brackets. So to start with, I am going to click on generate. And I'm only going to generate brackets for the unbracketed wrestlers. I also have some other options for deleting the existing brackets and generating, or just deleting brackets. And I also have the option to allow wrestlers from the same team to be bracketed together as a last resort. So I'll click on generate. Now it gives me the results of the generation. Out of my 234 wrestlers, I have 21 wrestlers unbracketed. I have a total of 56 brackets. 45 of them are full 4-man brackets. 11 of them are partial brackets, so there's 3 men in the 4-man bracket. 4 of the brackets have wrestlers from the same team, and I have a total of 57 teams. And we can also see the breakdown of the mats and the brackets. So, to start with, you can kind of review how well the system did the bracketing. It tries to separate or keep them together by weight and also by skill level. As you can see, the system did a pretty decent job of keeping the beginners together, the intermediate and experienced wrestlers together. The brackets over here have a few options. You can minimize them. It also has menu options if I wanted to edit this bracket, if I wanted to print the wall and table bracket for it, the wall, or one or the other, or you can also view the history of this bracket to see who made the changes, or I could simply delete the bracket. So the goal here is to obviously get everybody in a bracket. So I have 21 wrestlers who are unbracketed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show my search options. And as I mentioned before, we want helpers to help us do the bracketing. So I recommended having five people if you have 5 different divisions. Basically, one person dedicated to bracket each division that you have. So our tournament has 5 divisions, so I'd recommend having 5 people helping bracket. So if I was assigned to bracket the kindergartners and pre-K kids, I would select those 2 under the grade and just filter those out for now. So I have 6 wrestlers to bracket. So to start with, I like to click on this little magnifying glass here, which is a quick find by weight. Now what that does, it'll open up the searching options for each bracket. It'll pre-fill the weight range based off of how I configured the tournament for weight differences. And I also like to select the same grades. Maybe I'll throw in the first graders as well. Go ahead and search. So I have a total of 7 brackets that could be possible options for this wrestler. And if I look over here, I also have another kindergartner who is right around the same weight. So these 2 wrestlers could wrestle together. So I'm just going to look around 43 pounds or so. Now here we have a kindergartner wrestling all pre-K kids, and he's an intermediate wrestler. So I think this wrestler could wrestle these 2 guys. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new bracket. I'm going to grab this wrestler, I'm going to drag him all the way up to the top here where it says drop wrestlers here to create a new bracket. So I'm going to drop that wrestler there. I'm going to grab this wrestler, drop him on that bracket, grab this wrestler, drop him in there as well. I'm going to create a 4-man bracket and click create. Now here's my new bracket. Okay, now I can go back over to my unbracketed list, look at who's next. I got 2 kindergartners around the same weight. They could wrestle each other. They could wrestle each other, or I could put them in with another bracket. So to show off 5-man brackets, I'm just going to drop it in this bracket. It's already full. I'll get a warning saying it already has 4 wrestlers. So I'm going to change the bracket type to a 5-man. And now it's a 5-man round robin. If I take that wrestler out, and then I get a warning saying this is a 5-man bracket but only has 4 wrestlers. So what you can do to fix that is click on the menu, click on edit, and change it back to a 4-man round robin. If you don't do that, that's okay. When it goes to printing, the system will automatically change 5-man round robins down to a 4-man round robin bracket if there's only 4 wrestlers in that bracket. So another warning that you might see as you're doing bracketing, if I would take this wrestler who's 65 pounds and drop him in this bracket, make it a 5-man, I'm going to get a warning saying the weight differences exceed 9%. So that is the percentage that these wrestlers fall into as far as when we set up the tournament, there's the weight differences. So for this, one of these wrestlers, any one of these wrestlers, it shouldn't have exceeded 9%. Well, dropping a 65-pound wrestler in there exceeds it, so we get a warning. So it's kind of indication that, hey, maybe I better look at this again and take that wrestler back out, or maybe it's something accidental. So it tries to help you along the way to not make those type of mistakes, or just kind of validate how you're bracketing. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to drop this guy in here. And I could even make it a 6-man bracket if I'd like. And I get the warning, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. You also get a warning if you have 2 wrestlers from the same team in the same bracket. So if I can find one here. Here's a wrestler from Neillsville. Pittsville, Neillsville here. Okay, so if I can show off swapping. So if I swap these 2 wrestlers, I could I hover over swapping, let go of my mouse, and then I get a warning or a confirmation message asking if I really want to swap these 2 wrestlers. So I say yes, and now I get a warning saying more than 1 wrestler are on the same team. And I get the same thing up here. 2 wrestlers are from La Crosse. So I want to take that 1 wrestler back out. So I'm going to swap them back. Okay, we're good to go again. Alright, so I'll just continue on my list here. Next wrestler is 65 pounds. And I'll just keep going down the list as I have. If I was assigned to do 1st graders and 2nd graders, I would have only had 3 wrestlers to bracket. So one thing I should mention though is when you generate brackets, how many brackets that are actually generated by the system, that number ranges quite a bit. It all depends on who shows up at your tournament. You could have a lot of kids from the same school, a lot of kids around the same weight from the same school. So there's a lot of different variables. So for this tournament, we had like 21 wrestlers we had to manually bracket. 20 I would say around 30 is maybe the average. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but somewhere around there. Okay, so the next feature I want to just demonstrate here is if you have 2 users working on the same bracket, sometimes it's hard to know if somebody is working on the same bracket, and to prevent 2 people from overwriting each other, so I'm going to open up a new tab here to represent a different user on the system, and maybe they're working on a bracket that they didn't know someone else was bracketing. Maybe they had to move one of their wrestlers up to a different division that someone else is already working on. So I'm just going to change the seeding for this bracket, which I know seeding doesn't make a whole lot of difference in round robin, but just to make a difference to that bracket. So if I go over here, this is Tucker McDonald. Say I want to change this wrestler. I'll get a warning message saying I updated this bracket 13 seconds ago and that I'm not looking at the most recent data, so it's going to ask me to refresh my data. So I refresh and I'll see Tucker is now the 2nd seed. So just try to help inadvertent overwrites on a bracket. And if you have any questions of who did what to a bracket, you can always go to the history for that bracket, and it keeps the details as far as what happened to it. So here we could see Tucker changed seed from 1 to 2, and Abel Fry changed seeds from 2 to 1. Alright, so I can close that and continue on here. So for the sake of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bracket everyone we have here. And I'll be back as soon as everyone is bracketed, and I'll continue on with the next steps, such as printing. Okay, so now I have everybody bracketed. Next step would be to go through and kind of scan through the brackets, make sure the skill levels and weights seem appropriate for all the brackets. After that, you can go to print. You could also go to stats and kind of see how things lined up. If your bracket numbers, say mat 1 typically has a lot more bracket numbers on it than the other mats before you generate brackets or print. Don't worry about that. As soon as you go to print, it's going to auto generate or distribute the brackets across the mats, and then you can view how that turned out. So right now they're evenly distributed. Mats 9 and 10 are slightly different because those are specifically only, the 7th and 8th graders are only allowed to be bracketed on mats 9 and 10. So you can check yes, you've confirmed that you've reviewed all the brackets. And then you're presented with the print options. So here you can print the coaches sheets. So you can select which schools you want to print a sheet for. You can pick also which divisions you want to print them for. So here is our coaches sheet. It lists the wrestler name, the grade, the weight, what mat number, what bracket number. You can also keep track of their wins, losses, and what place it took, as well as adding special notes for that wrestler. So there's a separate page for each team at your tournament. Next, we're going to print the wall brackets. You can select what mat number, bracket type, or page size. Typically, people just want to print everything and get it out to the tables. So here we have the wall bracket. It's a lot bigger font, so it's easier to read when it's on the table. When it's on the wall. It has the grade range for that bracket, the weight range for that bracket, what mat, what bracket number, who's on that bracket, and who's wrestling who each round, as well as a QR code for fans to scan that with their smartphone and bring up this bracket online. And lastly, we need to print the table brackets. Please note the converting to a PDF is a somewhat slow process, so just be patient. It will make your printing life easier when things will print exactly as you see them. So here's the table brackets. Here's the 4-man. Same thing, lists the mat or the grade range, weight range, mat 1, bracket 1, the wrestlers. Here you can keep track of their wins, losses, pins, and which place for the table workers. For the 4-man round robins, it has a scoring criteria. They can simply circle the criteria as it happens for each period. They can select down, neutral, or top. Keep track of the fall time if there was a fall, their score. There's also a blank line on the bottom here to track whatever they'd like. And then here's a spot for the finish time. If I jump down to one of the 5-man brackets, you'll notice there isn't the scoring criteria. That's because we couldn't fit the scoring criteria all on one page with the 5-mans, because there's just 2 extra rounds in there. So I didn't want it to deal with separate pieces of paper. I thought it'd be easier to have one page per bracket. So here you have to write in the score in each round. Otherwise, the rest of the bracket is the same. Alright, and that covers printing. Now that we have everything printed, some parents came back, they weren't happy, they wanted some wrestlers swapped around. So for whatever reason, for the sake of this demo, let's swap some around. I'll take this pre-K and I'll swap them with this wrestler. Just for the sake of making a change after things have been printed. Now I don't have to keep track of exactly which brackets I changed. the system will do that for us. So I can go to the history here. I know I changed the brackets, so I know I need to reprint them. So I can go to the history, and it'll show me the time that I made these changes. So these are the last 2 changes that I made. So I swapped these 2 wrestlers. I removed this wrestler and I added this wrestler. So I can simply go to print wall and table bracket here. I don't have to keep track of specifically which ones I changed. Just come into history, click on the print wall and table bracket and get them out to the tables and the wall. Another thing I'd like to mention is after we do the printing, the system will no longer generate this bracket number for us. So we don't want that to change automatically anymore. So if you would go to edit, now you have the option. You could change this bracket number if you would ever need to. Typically, that's not something that you would need to do. It'll also show you who created this bracket and who last modified this bracket. That pretty much wraps it up. I could mention too the touch feature. If you were on a laptop that supports touch, by default, if you try to grab the bracket with your finger and drag it over from one side to the other, it most likely will not work. So we have this feature. You can turn that on, and that should enable that feature to drag from with your fingers. Typically, I recommend using a mouse. Mouse is a lot more precise and easier to move these brackets around, but every once in a while some people like to use touch. So we have that feature if you would need it. And that wraps it up.